It's Dr. Know-It-All coming to you one more time from Manhattan Beach. We are leaving town tomorrow morning, which is about the time this video will go live. Anyway, I wanted to talk about two quick things tonight. One of them is an Elon Musk cryptic tweet, as always. He loves to do cryptic tweets. And then the other one is a really interesting and lovely article by Gail Alfar, who I'll put the link to that in the description so you can check it out. Anyway, apropos of nothing, a couple of hours ago, Elon Musk said the outside context problem. So, and apologies to the neighbor's dog. So, sorry, can't do much about that one. So, anyway, the outside context problem, and I was like, I wonder what in the world that is. So, I went ahead and looked this up. Much to my shame, I actually did not know about this beforehand, but it is a quote from, let me move this over just a little bit, from Ian Banks, who is a science fiction writer. An outside context problem was the sort of thing most civilizations encountered just once, in which they tended to encounter rather in the same way a sentence encountered a full stop. So what does that mean exactly? Well, I went and found this information from this. An outside context problem is a large-scale problem that is beyond the imagination of a society, organization, or individual before it suddenly happens. The classic example is an isolated island with primitive technology that suddenly encounters a more advanced civilization. They say that things like aliens coming to the Earth is not necessarily an outside context problem because we've had science fiction writers talking about that. Yeah, so there's that, and I guess they say that global warming isn't a societal outside context problem. Although honestly, I can remember from when I was a child, like in the late 60s, early 70s, people talking about climate destruction and everything. Global warming is a little bit of a nuance on that. But certainly, this does not seem to be something that's quite that outside of outside context for me, at least. But anyway, the problem with this is that if you look at this situation, an isolated island with primitive technology that encounters a more advanced civilization, what happens at that point? That society is finished usually. The encounter is rather the same as a sentence encountering a full stop. In other words, that society is done for at the moment that it encounters this more advanced society. So whatever Elon is talking about here is probably not a great thing. So that's what I said, AI, aliens, both of these seem to be at least partially understood. I suppose you're suggesting we should be losing sleep over the unknown unknowns at this point. In other words, things that we don't even know enough to worry about. So that is it's a concern. But anyway, it's always curious to think about what Elon is thinking about when he tweets these because he doesn't give a lot of context for them. Ha ha ha. So anyway, just an interesting little tidbit there. So if you have ideas of what Elon is talking about here, I would be very happy to hear about that from you. So turning to something that's much more positive, Gail Alfar, and it's Gail Alfar ATX. If you don't follow her, you should definitely be following her. Anyway, she does an in-depth look at Tesla's strategic supercharging as part of Master Plan Part 3, the Investor Day, North American Charging Standard Supercharging, and a 4th of July road trip, which is her personal thing. And you can see it's very long, so I'm not going to read the entire thing. Like I said, you should definitely read this yourself if you have a chance to do so. I highly recommend it. Anyway, so she talks about the infrastructure and why Tesla's supercharging network is as powerful as it is. And it's kind of amazing when you think about this, actually. The reason I wanted to touch on this a little bit is that people really don't give Tesla's supercharging network and the superchargers themselves enough credit. They are an amazing accomplishment on their own, regardless of whatever else Tesla is doing, regardless of the cars that they make, of the solar panels and the batteries and all of that kind of stuff. The superchargers on their own would make any other company just doing that incredibly happy to be able to do something like this. This was something, it was a vision about 10 years ago. I think it was 2012 or 2013 when they started to be put out. And it was the sort of thing that everybody called Elon Musk crazy when he did it. They were like, this is stupid. Why would you spend all of this money when there's like 1,000 Teslas on the road, to put in these superchargers? But of course, he could see that you were never going to get uptake on electric vehicles until fast charging was available. Number one, like charging quickly, because it's one thing you can obviously charge at home and then it doesn't matter how long it takes because You can sit it in your garage overnight for 8 or 10 hours and it will charge up. So no big deal how fast it charges at that point. But in order for people to fully replace and be comfortable with replacing gas cars with electric vehicles, you need to have fast charging so that they can charge up quickly when they need to, and they need to be all over the place. They need to be based everywhere. You can't have just a few of these things around because otherwise people can't do road trips and stuff. And so Gail's talking about, her personal anecdote here is a July 4th road trip. Misinformation and I have done a bunch of road trips. We actually have our rental Tesla out there right now since we're in California. But it really matters a lot if you can charge these things up quickly and if it's convenient. And of course, the more convenient it gets over time, the more they install these things, the better off everybody is and the happier everybody is. So, it's very important to have a solid infrastructure and to have it all over the place. So she goes back to Investor Day on March 1st of 2023 when there was a presentation on this from Rebecca Tanucci. I think I'm pronouncing that properly. But anyway, she talks a great deal in that Investor Day presentation about what it is that they're going for, both for the home charging experience, which again is not, the goal is not to be super fast there, it's just to make it super convenient. And that's where they actually showed that picture of the car, a Tesla pulling in over a charging pad, and effectively you just drive into your parking spot in your garage or wherever it is, and it just starts to charge, and you never even have to think about it. You don't have to plug anything in, all of that kind of stuff. But then we get to this really, really lovely couple of paragraphs. Tanucci explained that in 2022, Tesla provided 9 terawatt hours of charging across various charging methods, and over 50% of that was supplied by convenient AC home charging. So that means that basically 4.5 plus terawatt hours of charging happened at home, hopefully during off hours and things like that mostly. And people complain about the charging networks being a big drain on the electrical grid and how you can't utilize charging networks to do that because the grid can't support it. But actually the charging, if it's done properly, actually helps to balance the grid. Because one of the problems is that if you produce a lot of power, you have to send it someplace. It can't just not go anywhere. That's not how electricity works. So you have to do something with it, including dumping it a lot of times. So it's very, very wasteful to do that. And if you charge up cars overnight, which is the reason why many, many electric companies, including like Walton EMC, Georgia Power, I'm sure Pacific Gas and Electric out here, like if you charge things up from 11 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning, they'll give you a good rate because it actually helps to balance the grid. That means there's a more consistent amount of energy being requested all the time. And that's actually a really, really important point to this, is that far from destabilizing the grid, it actually can help to stabilize the grid. It can be something that helps to load balance everything over time, which is a really important point. But anyway, Tesla owners have always been able to access over, I don't know about always, this is recent, but they're up to 80,000 charging points, and that includes 40,000 of Tesla's Superchargers. Now this is flourishing charging network will be open to other EVs who adopt NACS. And she goes on to talk about several people driving Rivians and Kias and things that are super excited about getting access to this charging network because it's a really big deal. If you don't, one of the I mean, we wanted to get a Tesla for many reasons, but one of the big reasons to get a Tesla for us is we knew we were going to road trip with it, and we knew that that was the only supercharging network that was functional and was going to be something that we could trust, and we could drive long distances without having to stress about the fact that we could get stuck someplace. So it's a very, very big deal and a very, very important point. One other thing that's really interesting here that I want to bring up is, and I'll put a link to this in the description as well, there was a congressperson who was getting testimony from, and unfortunately, it's one of those TikTok type videos and it doesn't really have context. And so the person she was talking to, it didn't say who he was, but he was basically saying, like, she said, oh, this is terrible in a hurricane situation, that you'll have an electric vehicle and you'll have to like borrow your friend's ice vehicle in order to get out of wherever it is, Miami or Tampa or wherever it is that the hurricane is coming. But I thought that the response to that was a really, really bad response because he basically said, yeah, you're going to have to borrow somebody's internal combustion engine vehicle to drive out. But it's like everybody has long, like 24, 48, 72-hour windows where they know about hurricanes. Now, weather forecasting has gotten very, very good. And if you know that and you have a 300-mile range car, you fill it up with electricity beforehand and you drive. If you're say 250 miles inland from wherever this bad thing is happening, and you don't wait till the last possible second when the storms are already huge and they've already knocked out all the power and everything, you're going to be able to find charging stations there. So in a way, and also don't forget that gas can have a run on it too. So you might have no place to fill up your gas car as well. So anyway, I thought it was a very poor response to a question that should have been answered. It does need to be answered, but it needs to be answered in the sense of like, people know about this. They have opportunities to charge. People will charge. And if you charge up your car to full, you can get to some place that's far enough inland that it won't be that drastically affected by a hurricane. And you can then charge up again and continue on if you want to go further than that. Anyway, getting back to Gail's article here, I just want to touch on two more things. Number one, how did they get so good at it? Getting here has meant that we spent 10 years building charging infrastructure, but basically nobody else in the industry would do it. Those 10 years have afforded us the opportunity to get pretty good at charging. And that is a very, very good point. That is something that, nobody else was doing it. Nobody was helping. There was no federal subsidies or anything. Tesla was on their own. So they not only had to do it, but they had to do it efficiently, financially, and time efficiently. And that was a really, really important point. And that's something that Tesla does very, very well. And they were able to create a network that has incredible reliability. I think it's 99.5% reliability or something like that. So they have this incredible like network that they built, and it was because they had to. Their backs were to the wall. If they wanted people to adopt their EVs and eventually other EVs, they were going to have to do something like this. And yeah, other companies like Rivian and like GM and like Ford, etc., are riding on the backs of this, but eventually it's going to be free advertising for Tesla, which is great. It won't make them a ton of money in the near term, but it is going to make people very, very focused on the quality of the brand. And hopefully that quality will continue as it moves off of just Teslas and other vehicles get to utilize that as well. Hopefully that's one of the things where Tesla engineers will help the other engineers in these other companies to create really, really good software that works as well as a Tesla does, because literally a Tesla is like you just pull it, plug it in, and it goes, and you never even have to think about it. And then the final point I want to touch on is the cost. Lower cost gets passed to the consumers, lower cost to build this stuff. Tesla's mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. So naturally, costs to power your EV will cost less than filling up a gas tank. Tesla uses less expensive renewable energy to power superchargers. These cost savings also come from Tesla's approach to finding the most efficient ways to deploy superchargers and vertically integrate the supply chain. Tanucci explained, first, we have the industry's lowest deployment costs. Our costs are often 20, if not 70% lower than alternatives, and that goes for both our supercharging hardware and deployment and our AC charging product lines. Interestingly enough, after that, Tanucci goes on to explain how what they're doing is they're maximizing the number of people using the charging stations as well by doing better trip planning and predictive trip planning and all of that stuff. If you watch the Tesla Investor Day presentation, you'll remember that, I'm sure. But the important point is, number one, it's costing them a lot less money to actually install the superchargers. And then you don't want to install a supercharger station and only have one, you install 16 and one gets used per day. You're going to lose a ton of money on that, which means you have to charge a lot of money to the one person who's charging there. So you want to maximize you want to maximize the location, put it in a location where a lot of people are going to use it, and then you want to fill that up to almost max capacity, but not max capacity. And that is really, really tricky. That is not an easy thing to do. And Tesla has had some hiccups in the past about that, where there have been some superchargers that have gotten too overfull, and there have been long waiting lists and waiting lines and things like that. But they're getting better and better and better about that. And they're using predictive planning now too, to see what's going to happen in the future and to guide people to superchargers that are less busy. So it's a pretty challenging thing. All of this stuff is really, really challenging that Tesla is doing, but they make it look super easy, as with so many other things that they do. But the consequence of all this is that what you have as a consumer is you have an amazing supercharging network that is now going to be opened up to other manufacturers, and that is going to make their experience of owning an EV better, which means that Tesla's mission is being fulfilled, that they are actually accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. They're not just doing it themselves, they're actually also doing it for other companies as well. And like I said, in the long term, this is free advertising. People are going to know Tesla's brand. They're going to know the quality of it. They're going to be like, yeah, I have such good experiences with that. I talk to Tesla owners when I go and charge. The next EV I'm going to buy, I'm going to seriously look at getting a Tesla. So it will help them long term, even though it won't help them all that much in the short term. I think it's a very, very powerful thing. Anyway, definitely read her article. It's really, really good, really, really interesting. And again, if you know about outside context problems and you know what Elon might have been talking about, I would definitely be interested to know about that as well. And in the meantime, we will probably be traveling if you watch this in the first day. So wish us safe flying back home again. It'll be good to get back home. It's been a lot of travel this summer so far. And in the meantime, everybody have a lovely day, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.